55 years ago. Let's speak to Larry Luxner, who's news editor at the Washington Diplomat, joins us from Washington, D.C. Larry, good to see you there. Cuba's future is for Cubans to shape, says John Kerry. To what degree do you think, as it stands, Cuba will benefit from what's just happened?
I think Cuba stands to benefit tremendously from what just happened today. It has been 55 years since an American flag flew over the U.S. Embassy, and this is a natural trading pattern. Before the embargo, Cuba depended almost 90% of its imports from the United States, and millions of American tourists visited Cuba. That all came to a sudden end. So you can imagine that with the restoration of diplomatic relations and the eventual lifting of the embargo, I think that can have an enormous impact on Cuba. But for now, the embargo
at the moment, the embargo is still very much in place and looks as if it will be for some time.
Under the Helms-Burton Act of 1996, the embargo cannot be lifted as long as either of the Castro brothers is in power. So, of course, for that to end the embargo itself, the Helms-Burton Act will have to be abolished. That, of course, takes an act of Congress, and as your correspondent mentioned, the Congress is currently controlled by the Republicans, and a number of Democrats are also opposed to the lifting of the embargo. In fact, we heard Robert Menendez this morning say that the raising of the U.S. flag over the embassy in Havana is wrong-headed, and Ileana Ros-Lehtinen said this is a disgrace, and Marco Rubio, candidate for president, is also opposed to this.
So a good moment today, but still a long way to go.
Yes, and I think there are a number of obstacles, even if the embargo is lifted, for full restoration of relations, one of which is the claims. 5,911 certified claims are on register with the U.S. government against Cuba, and those companies that are owed billions of dollars when Cuba nationalized them in 1960, they're going to want to see some of their money back, and that's going to be an issue. Also, Guantanamo is a thorn in the side of our relations, and they're going to want Cuba will want some compensation, if not receiving Guantanamo back in full. And the Cuban Adjustment Act of 1966 will have to be looked at. That allows any Cuban who who leaves Cuba to eventually apply for citizenship. And all of those are going to have to be looked at in the context of U.S.-Cuba relations.
Right. So we have the U.S. flag flying over the U.S. Embassy in Havana, but Cuban flags, of course, adorn the capital and elsewhere around Cuba, and the leadership saying that nothing is going to change, the leadership is not going to change direction. But won't it have to if Cuba is going to reintegrate itself into world affairs?
Yes. Raul Castro has already made clear that he will step down as president in 2018. So a younger generation of Cubans will, in effect, take over, whether anybody likes that or not. This is just biological. I think another impact of the raising of the U.S. flag is the image that the United States will enjoy in Latin America. For many years, this has been a huge obstacle to improved relations with not only Latin America, but other Caribbean countries, including the English-speaking Caribbean. So this increases our stature in the United States as a leader, as a regional leader, vis-a-vis countries like Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia.
All right, Larry, we'll leave it there. Very good to get your perspective on this. Thanks very much indeed. Larry Luxner, news editor of the Washington Diplomat. Well, meanwhile, as Larry was alluding to there, there's renewed calls for the U.S. prison at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba to be closed. The U.S. Defense Department says it's evaluating potential